I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and behind me is a watershed vehicle for Kia. This is the EV9. What it is not is cheap. What it is a genuine rival to vehicles like the Volvo XC90 and Audi Q7. That's not a line out of the brochure. That's the verdict I've come to after road testing this vehicle in the country, in the suburbs, and on the highway. Kia has pulled a rabbit out of a hat on this vehicle. The Australian suspension tune is an order of magnitude more capable than the one I tested in Korea a month or two ago. This vehicle is luxurious. It's refined, and it is fully electric, something that neither Audi nor Volvo can sell you right now in the large luxury SUV space. So how have they done it? What are this vehicle's positive points, and where does it still have weak spots? I'm going to let you know the answer to all of those questions in today's video. Before we get started, hit subscribe. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Jump up into the EV9 and you know you're in a large SUV, both from the space on offer and also the interior design, which is really stylized to emphasize the width of this car. It is a big vehicle. If you've got a tight garage or a tight parking space, you're gonna want to go there on your test drive to make sure that it fits. It's not too long, it's just pretty wide. And that does help the handling, as we'll find out shortly. But it also means you're sitting up here in a cab that feels kind of like a Blade Runner version of a Range Rover. And that's no bad thing. I think Kia, as well as Hyundai and Genesis, have really leaned into their Korean heritage in terms of design, and they've found their own stride. And this interior feels good. It doesn't feel outright luxury, but it's definitely semi-premium to premium, and that's where the car needs to be at this kind of price. The EV9 is definitely ambitiously priced, even from the base model. Work your way up through the earth to this top spec GT line, and you're paying some pretty significant coin for this restyled Kia badge, aren't you? But the fundamentals are there. I want to start with the seats. In Australia, this is the only seat offered on the GT line. It's got a charcoal majority, and then it does have this white upper and a white mesh headrest. These seats are phenomenally comfortable for many hours in the saddle. They've got a lot of adjustment. They've got air inflatable side bolsters. They've got a heap of under thigh angle adjustment, which is awesome. You can really tilt the seat pretty much right back. They've got heating, they've got cooling, they've got massage. So in that way, this feels like a proper luxury car. Leather steering wheel, not real leather. In fact, there is no leather used in this interior, but it's a pretty good imitation. We've got paddle shifters for the regen braking and physical buttons for all the main controls that you want. And that carries across to the volume, the temperature, and the fan speed. All still have physical knobs and buttons, which is awesome. You then have this interesting inlay here, which is kind of like a metal in the Australian spec car. In Korea, they get wood, which actually looks warmer and more expensive. But you have to push through it in order to select map, media, home, those shortcut keys. This is Kia's latest infotainment system. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, there is support for the wireless version, but the Australian cars still don't have it. We think it's just a software update away, but Kia and Hyundai are still being cagey on that. The driver's screen, it lacks for a bit of customization. You can't put a map there, you can't put your multimedia there. In that way, an Audi Q7 is still superior. You do have a small sunroof up here, separate sunroof in the back, and a lovely kind of, I don't know what this is, but it's a sort of ultra suede-y, minky sort of texture on the roof, which feels really nice. Storage space is great. We've got big cup holders here, heaps of storage down below, a bin in the back, a shallow armrest here, wireless charging, heaps of room to stash everyday clutter. Material quality is generally good. One note would be the Meridian stereo in this car. It's all right, it's not great. The Bang & Olufsen you can get in an Audi Q7 or the Bowers & Wilkins in a Volvo XC90 are easily a cut above. Now the EV9 is a 3-row SUV, and I'll get into the 3rd row in just a minute, but this SUV is particularly generous if you're actually only going to use it as a 2-row vehicle, as some people do, just keeping the 3rd row for occasional use. Now, it's a lot bigger than an EV6 in overall size, and it's also bigger than a Sorento. Overseas, Kia sells the Telluride in some markets. We don't get that here in Australia. So this is Kia's first really big SUV for the Australian market, and I think that will appeal because there's heaps of space for families. And I think that's an important point. You wouldn't just buy this car because you want an EV, you want to do well by the environment if you're buying a new car, that sort of thing. It's actually just really appealing as an SUV the electrification part is just one facet. It reminds me a bit of the Porsche Taycan in that way. The EV9 is a good car first and a good EV second, and I think that's the way it should be. Anyway, back to the second row. You can see for myself, behind my own driving position, legroom's immense, toe room is very good, headroom is also good, even though we do have the fitment of a fixed pane sunroof here in the back, which is a nice feature. We can see the late afternoon sky on this cloudy day here in Sydney. And then in front of that sunroof, we also have a climate panel here with a separate fan and temperature zone for the back, and air vents up here in the roof as well. Plus, we've got some amenities back here, a flip down armrest with 2 cup holders, really nice soft materials up on the doors, heating and cooling for the second row seats, a real luxury, and integrated sunblinds, so you won't need any tacky aftermarket items. So here I am in the third row of the EV9, and what I've done is I've put the second row pretty much into its middle position, so someone sitting here would absolutely have enough legroom, but now I also have enough legroom as an adult sitting in the third row, and that's exactly what this car is all about. It's not as practical as a Kia Carnival, but it's a very stylish, large, luxury electric SUV, and it's nice to know that it does have a usable third row. Kids will be happy back here. They've got air vents, they've got cup holders, they've got USB-C ports. This car is full of USB-C ports, and they also have enough room. And if you have to stash adults back here, they won't complain too much. The fact that the EV9 has a frunk is a positive, but this is one area where you can see that Kia is still trailing the likes of Tesla on packaging efficiency. This is all about miniaturization. The reason Teslas are able to have big frunks but also powerful motors is that their motors are more miniature than what the Hyundai Group currently uses on their cars, including the EV9, and it's also about the miniaturization of various other components. Here we've got the all-wheel drive version of the EV9, so we do have a motor and other gubbins happening underneath all this beauty plastic here. So the frunk is pretty minimal. You'll get your charging stuff in there, you might get like one overnight bag in there. The rear-wheel drive version of the EV9 does have more space under the bonnet, however, but something like a Tesla Model X, not sold in Australia, rather unhelpfully, has got more storage space up front again. Opening up the power tailgate of the EV9, couple of beeps, and then the big door with big struts gets out of the way quickly, revealing a nicely finished boot with grey carpeting. We do have a little Velcroed bag here for your home charger. Just put that to one side for now, drop it on the floor. Underneath this boot floor here, we actually have very nicely packaged storage for the cargo blind, so you don't have to just throw that in the garage, it can sit right here. No spare on this car, which is a real shame. I was hoping the EV9 would be unlike most other EVs and that it would have a spare. It doesn't. We've got a tyre compressor and a goo kit. But I do, however, have the third row seats erected, and as you can see, there is enough room here for a big shop or all the school bags, which is great. Now, the Australian spec EV9 doesn't have the power third row, which is a bit of a shame. You do get that in Korea, but that being said, it's real easy to drop those seats. You don't even have to get your slacks dirty on the rear bumper. Easy done, anyone can do that. And then the boot is massive when you've got 5 seats in place, and van-like if you put that middle row down, which can be done with some buttons here in the boot. In terms of other features here in the boot, you do have toggles to drop down the second row seats. You've also got a 3-pin power socket, another one here for vehicle to load, and a 12-volt socket over here. Controls on the back of the door to drop that power tailgate, or you can close it and also lock the car, which means it's time for us to talk about the range, efficiency, charging, and other running costs. The EV9 is a big SUV and it deserves a big battery, and if you go for the all-wheel drive versions, you get one with about 95 kilowatt hours of usable space. Kia won't say exactly, but that's our estimate. We put the EV9 GT-Line through our chasing cars, range, efficiency and charging tests. Its urban efficiency is 18.7 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks as tested for 508 kilometers of urban range. Its highway efficiency is a little thirsty at 23.2 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks for a real-world highway range of 409 kilometers. Thankfully, the EV9 charges pretty quickly. Our charging test measures how long it would take you to replenish 50 to 350 kilometers of range on a typical highway road trip, and in the EV9, it's just under 30 minutes. We saw a peak charging speed of 215 kilowatts, which is a little bit short of the 240 kilowatts that this car should theoretically be able to do. When it comes to servicing, Kia sells a prepaid 5-year 75,000 kilometer service plan for $1,351. The EV9 is covered by a 7-year unlimited kilometre vehicle warranty, but its battery warranty is only 7 years and 150,000 Ks, a little bit shorter than average, and that warranty is only to retain 65% of the battery capacity, which would take the real-world highway range down to 265 kilometres. So, what is the Kia EV9 like to drive? Well, I think it'd be a real shame if this SUV was bad to drive, because when it looks this cool and it's so convincing in the cabin and it's so ambitiously priced, I think it's fair to say, it would be a great shame if it was bad to drive. Well, thankfully, it's not bad to drive. This is one of the best efforts that Kia has ever produced in terms of holistic driving dynamics. Now, it's not sporty. It might bear GT-Line branding, but I'm not out here to tell you that this is a sports SUV. It's not trying to be one. It maybe has a hint of athleticism here and there, but this is a vehicle which is trying to compete with established premium SUVs like the Volvo XC90 and the Audi Q7. Forget the electric competition, it'll probably come along eventually. This car needs to convince you not to buy an XC90. That is what the EV9 is trying to do. And you know what? I think it does a very, very convincing job of that. I think it is only shades of difference between the ride quality and the refinement of the EV9 and hallowed luxury SUVs like that Volvo, like that Audi, even cars like the BMW X7, which is probably the best in the large luxury SUV segment here in Australia, but it is way more expensive again than the Kia EV9. And I think that's important to keep in perspective. Sure, this car is 120 grand before on-road costs. That's a really expensive Kia. But the BMW X7 is another 30, 40, 50 grand on top of what this costs you, and it's not fully electric. So we've got to remember that there's a lot of cost baked into the EV9 platform because it has a circa 100 kilowatt hour battery, it's got dual motor all-wheel drive, so on and so forth. So now that I've got that bit out of the way, let's talk about the mechanical package. So it's above and beyond what you get in an EV6 GT line. We know the total battery capacity of the EV9's big battery is just under 100 kilowatt hours. Kia and Hyundai don't generally disclose usable size, but our estimates put this at about 95 kilowatt hours of usable space. The EV9 in all-wheel drive form produces 282 kilowatts of power and 700 newton meters of torque. And you kinda need that because the GT line is a big bus, it's heavy. Over 2.6 tons, so that ain't light and you're gonna need quite a lot of power to motivate that. And that's what you gotta remember, 282 kilowatts sounds like a lot, but the power to weight ratio is not too rosy. However, somehow, as I just demonstrated almost silently then, the EV9 has an uncanny ability to accelerate like a petrol V8 and then some. So point this thing up a highway on-ramp, especially an on-ramp that goes up to an elevated highway, plant the boot, and the best analogy I could give you is the BMW X7 M60i, it's now called. It used to be the M50i. But this thing might be even more refined than that. It feels like an absolutely torquey, absolutely silken, turbocharged V8, but without, of course, the soundtrack and without the gear changes. That is a level of powertrain refinement that Kia has been able to achieve here on the EV9, and that is simply staggering. There's a level of refinement here that is democratized. I'm not going to tell you that this is a cheap car, it's not, but it is bringing a level of powertrain refinement to a lower price point than what has existed at any point in this segment before. On the other side of the ledger is the regen braking, which is pretty well calibrated. There's still a little bit of a lurch in iPedal, the full regen mode, where occasionally sometimes there'll be a slight half a breath before the regen will kick in. I think there's still a little bit of fine tuning that can be done on the regen, but it's pretty convincing and it does help boost the efficiency of this vehicle, which is not great in town, but relatively decent on the open road, a bit more like a combustion car than most other EVs out there. In terms of the handling, you know, it definitely does its best for a 2.6 ton SUV, and you can tell the work that's gone in from the Australian side on the damping. That said, the Korean market version of the EV9 is also a keen handler. The Continental premium contact tyres are a good fit, and even though we've got very big 21-inch wheels with high levels of unsprung mass, which occasionally do fall into potholes, and that is noticeable. You've got a huge heavy wheel and tyre, you're going to feel that. The damping for almost all bumps feels really well sorted. There's a firmness, there's an underlying firmness to the EV9, but it is compliant, it is quiet, it is comfortable, it is relaxing inside. That's exactly what this SUV needs to do, and the EV9 is a really convincing shot at it. Generally speaking, refinement is good. I do think that stereo could be a bit better. Visibility, it's okay. These camera mirrors, they are an answer to a question nobody asked. That's just the fact. They aren't as intuitive to use. You can't just move your head to get a better field of view. I don't think Kia Australia should have taken these on the GT-Line. I wish you could de-spec them. Currently you can't. You've got to buy a lower end version of this car. The safety features, generally impressive. 360-degree camera works well for parking. The adaptive cruise is well sorted. The lane keep is well sorted. The speed warning, still really frustrating because it will read car park signs and then abuse you for going 6 kilometers per hour once you get onto a normal road. That's terrible. Kia has got to fix it. You can map a shortcut to turn it off. You can press this little star down here and then it's 4 taps to turn it off rather than 7 or more, I think. But seriously, that software just needs a general rethink. So that's my verdict on the 2024 Kia EV9 in GT-Line all-wheel drive trim out here in Australia. This is really expensive for a Kia, but if there's one thing you'd take away from this video, it's that actually, from an engineering standpoint, this car is not that expensive for what it is. It's really well sized, it's got a usable third row, it's got decent, if not outstanding range, it's got silken refinement and excellent ride quality and good handling, all in a fully electric package. Audi can't sell it to you. BMW can't sell it to you. Volvo can't sell it to you. Mercedes can, but the EQS SUV is like another 100 grand on top of this car and not even as good in some areas. I think that shows you where Hyundai and Kia's early bets in the eGMP platform are starting to pay off big time now. What do you think about this car? Would you ever consider spending this kind of money on a Kia? Let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.